Welcome to another edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I'm Dan Myler. With me, Ryan McDowell and Matt Price. Guys, we're all heavy into all these rookie drafts and even some rookie auctions right now, as we're now weeks separated from the NFL draft. But we want to talk more about these rookies. And last year we did a consensus rookie tiers episode about this time of year. It was well received. So we're going to do that once again, try to nail down these windows, these pockets of value and these trade windows. We're gonna go through every player that's really important when you're on the clock in the first couple rounds, first 3 rounds, maybe even of your rookie draft. We're assuming single quarterback. We'll get to all that in just a moment. First, though, let's talk to Ryan and Matt. Ryan, you're like I said, you're all in on these rookie drafts and rookie auctions. How are they going?
They're going well. I actually I cut a few leagues early this offseason, and I'm feeling that now. There's a few rookie drafts that I'm used to having that I'm not in, obviously, now that those leagues are gone, and kind of missing out on those. So I don't have as many as I normally do, but that's probably a good thing, big picture.
Yeah, big picture it is, but you get that fever, that draft fever, right? This time of year when you're not in as many as you want, and that's how you get sucked into way too many startups. We've all been down that path. Matt, how about you? These auctions and drafts, how are they treating you, bud?
It's good. It's been fun. I'll just talk about my favorite one so far. A couple of years ago, I took over an orphan in one of our buddy Dan Sanio's leagues, and it was a pretty bad team. And at that time, I traded for a 2021 first, so that was 2019 or 2018. So I ended up with the 101 this year. That pick that I traded for 2 years ago ended up as the 101. I traded a running back, Antonio Gibson, I think, for the 102, and then I moved a late first, like a 109 or 110 or something, and a bunch of other picks to get the 104. So I came away with Pitts, Chase, and ETN in that draft, and that was a lot of fun to pull off all those moves.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun. I haven't had quite that much luck in one of these auctions or drafts. We're going through all the kitchen sink auctions right now. Of course, Ryan and our buddy Scott Connor kind of dominated one of them that we were just in. So, man, I didn't get the itch scratched on that one. We gotta move on to KS3. Maybe I'll have a little more luck there. But anyway, I digress. Let's get to these consensus rookie tiers. We're gonna tier out all these ranks, try to pick which players belong in each tier. Maybe that can help some of our listeners, maybe even help the three of us figure out where those pockets of value and those trade windows might be in a draft. Again, we're assuming single quarterback. We're not going to do any tight end premium or anything like that. We'll have plenty of time to talk about super flex and all those values in future episodes. We got our rookie cash stash and trash episode coming up, so we'll have more opportunities for that kind of thing. But let's get right into tier 1. There are 3 of us, of course, on the show today, and we all put Kyle Pitts and Jamar Chase in tier 1. Then things got a little bit tricky to figure this out, guys. And Matt, you were the one that had just those 2 stud rookies in the tier, and then you started tiering down from there. So clearly you think there's a difference between those 2 top guys, Pitts and Chase, and the next few guys. Tell me why you think they belong in a tier by themselves at the top.
I just think those are the 2 that have 0 question marks for me. So there's no reason for me to take either of the running backs who will be in the next tier for me. Over those 2, I think those 2 running backs are a little bit a cut below some of the running backs from the last year's class. And there's enough difference there between those top 2 prospects and Chase and Pitts for me to keep them separate.
You know, I originally, when I saw your tier, Matt, I kind of rolled my eyes, like, oh, geez, it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult for us. But the more I've thought about it since I saw that, I've been saying for so long now that these are the 2 blue chip guys, the two real top of the line guys as far as pass catchers and runners go. So why not have them in a tier by themselves? I really don't mind it all that much. I stretched mine out a little farther. I have Jalen Waddle real close to Jamar Chase. There could be a tier difference then. And then I had those 2 running backs, Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. So I stretched mine as far as 5. Ryan, you added the 2 running backs. What's the case for those 2 running backs being in that top tier for you?
Yeah, I'm not sure there is one, honestly. I'm with you. I'm coming around to Matt's line of thinking as well. We do these same types of episodes with positional rankings earlier in the offseason, and we really get into the weeds and try to really differentiate between the players, between the tiers, obviously. And when it comes down to it, if I have a top 2 pick, I'm taking one of these 2 pass catchers, Chase or Pitts, and not really considering taking either Harris or ETN ahead of them. So I think Matt is right as well. We do these independently, and then we throw them together and kind of see what happens. And I think Matt came out ahead on this one.
Yeah, it really does feel that way. I've been slowly coming around. I think the only case that could probably be made for the 2 running backs would be if the settings were different. Maybe if we weren't assuming just the single quarterback, not some special scoring for running back carries or anything like that. Maybe also contract leagues could potentially muddy the waters a little bit when it comes to these tiers. If you have a maximum contract of only 3 years or something like that, perhaps that would make you push one of these running backs or both of these running backs up into tier 1, because as we all know, running backs are more likely to create that early production that we need in those contract and shorter window type leagues. We're not talking about that. So since it sounds like the 2 of us are willing to jump on the bandwagon, I guess, with Matt and put just Jamar Chase and Kyle Pitts in tier 1, let's leave it like that, and we'll jump right into tier 2. Now, that, of course, changes things for Ryan and I. We're gonna kind of adjust as we go here. That would put Najee Harris and Travis Etienne in all of our tier 2. Beyond that, where do we go, Ryan? What's the next group? Do we want to stop right there? It seems like Matt wanted to do that. Or do we want to add more players to that tier?
That would be the end of my tier 2, just the 2 running backs. And the same line of thinking. If I have the 103, the 104, I'm taking one of those 2 backs, assuming that the pass catchers are gone. I'm not considering any other wide receiver. I'm not considering Javonte Williams above either Harris or ETN. So it would be those 2 in tier 2 for me.
Matt, you had ETN and Harris in tier 2 alone, so I imagine you're real happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see a case for extending it to the third running back and the next two receivers if we really wanted to. But like Ryan said, there's almost no instance where I'm considering any of those guys over these 2. You know, I have seen people have Javonte Williams as their number 1 or number 2 in this class. So if that's the way they want to tier it, that's fine. But for me, those are the 2 that I'm considering right now in this tier.
All right, so we make it unanimous then. It goes Chase and Pitts in tier 1, followed by Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, the 2 big named running backs in tier 2. I think there's probably a case, Ryan, to be made that Javonte Williams is real close, probably closer to those 2 running backs, for sure closer to those 2 running backs than any running back behind him, but maybe closer to tier 2 than some of these guys in tier 3 for us, including that group of wide receivers like Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith and Rashad Bateman, maybe even you go deeper than that with Elijah Moore and Rondale Moore, but we'll get to those guys. What's the case for Javonte Williams being alone by himself in tier 3?
Yeah, that's how I would have it. Essentially, the depth of the wide receiver group, that second tier of wide receivers for me, behind Jamar Chase, the depth plays a big part in Williams not only being ranked ahead of all those guys, but a full tier ahead. So with that 5 spot, I'm taking the running back. I'm taking Williams there, taking advantage of the lack of depth really, and the big teardrop from Williams to, you know, Michael Carter or whoever your Trey Sermon, whoever your running back 4 might be. So really, it's about the depth of the receiver class that pushes Williams there for me.
So for you, Ryan, if you're sitting at 5, you're for sure taking Javonte Williams, not really looking at offers to move down unless you're really winning that kind of trade.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, Matt, you were more willing to put a couple of these wide receivers into tier 3 along with Javonte Williams. You had the couple of Alabama wideouts, Waddle and Smith, in there. Is there a case that you can make that they should for sure be right here with Javonte?
No, I think it's fine to have Javonte in a tier of his own here. I think that would create a tier of 2 with those 2 receivers for me again below this. So we're kind of spreading it out there. Cause I feel like those 2 are a little bit above the next set of receivers. Right. So, this is the area, like those top 4 are pretty much locked in for me. This is kind of the tier. Like if I wanted to start diversifying, maybe I take a Williams in one league, maybe I take a Waddle and a Smith in another one. This is the tier where I would do that. So they fit together nicely for me. But I can easily see a case for Williams in a tier by himself here.
If we're going to do this and put Javonte Williams by himself in tier 3, I think we have to set some guidelines for tier 4 and beyond. It really feels like you can't throw all of these wide receivers in one tier. And Ryan, I looking ahead into tier 4, you have 7 guys in there, and they're really all these wide receivers and maybe an elite quarterback sprinkled in there as well. And I see a relatively big difference between the guys that were selected in round 2 and then the guys that were selected early in round 1, especially. I had a little bit of trouble with Rashad Bateman, but guys like Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith, they seem so much closer to Jamar Chase than they are to a guy like Terrace Marshall. So I have a little bit of a problem if we're going to put Javonte in a tier by himself. I don't want to suddenly have this massive tier 4 full of these wide receivers, because there's a clear difference in at the very least, I would say, their landing spots and draft capital. I think there's enough there to spread these guys out.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, even in my own rankings, I would still have Rondale Moore very high. I don't see a huge difference, but the way we've typically done these, and we've done these types of episodes now for 2 or 3 years, it does basically turn into a consensus, or majority rules, I guess, type of episode. You've got Waddle in tier 2. Matt has Waddle in tier 3, which is where we are right now, and you both have Devonta Smith in tier 3. So I think based on what we're putting together here, it does make sense to have both Waddle and Smith in this tier with Javonte Williams, based on how you two are ranking those guys, and that's fine.
Matt, how do you feel about Waddle and Williams being the line, along with, or Waddle and Smith being the line, drawing the line after those 2 wide receivers and then getting to the others in tier 4?
Yeah, like you said, for me, there's just it's a very slight line, I would say. I think we're somewhere in the middle between how Ryan feels and how we feel. I think you said that you think Waddle and Smith are closer to Pitts, or excuse me, the Chase Pitts tier. But I would say they're closer to that next group for me. So I'm fine just sitting right here in the middle.
So it's probably not a consensus. There's one of us, myself, that thinks, yeah, we need to move these guys up. Matt, we need to be right in the middle where we are right now. And Ryan, you think maybe a line between the guys. We're going to land on Javonte Williams, Jalen Waddle, and Devonta Smith as our tier 3. So we are 7 players into it. Feels like a lot of times, Ryan, we've talked about these drafts, both on air and off, of course, the 3 of us, and we feel like there's a line somewhere in the middle to late part of the first round in these rookie drafts when we're not getting into the quarterbacks just yet. We've reached that line, it really feels like. You're going to get into the Rashad Batemans and Rondale Moores, Elijah Moore, start talking about the quarterbacks as well as Terrace Marshall. It feels like if there's a line that maybe becomes consensus among dynasty managers, it might be right here.
Yeah, I think this is, based on the drafts I've taken part in, based on ADP that I've seen, I think this is a pretty good representation of how we're seeing these one quarterback drafts play out, with the 2 Alabama wide receivers closer to the middle of the first. I don't think I've seen Waddle or Smith fall outside of the first round, certainly. and grouping them in that big tier with the Moores and Bateman and some of the other players could represent that that's happening. And I don't really think it is. So I think it makes sense to have this larger group of wide receivers as our fourth tier.
And that's where we're at, Matt. We're going to start talking about Bateman, the two Moores, and Marshall. And maybe we'll stretch it beyond that. But if really looking at these tiers, how we have them placed out, we all have these four wide receivers in this tier. I actually bumped Bateman up, but I was on the line on that one. I thought maybe he was a little closer to tier 3 than he was to tier 4. With the conversation that we had in tier 3, it's clear that I wasn't going to win that battle, so there was no point of putting up a fight for that. I like Bateman's upside, but I like Moore, Rondale Moore. I like Elijah Moore. I certainly like Terrace Marshall as well. So we're gonna just plug those guys in as tier 4 wide receivers. Beyond that, there's only one other consensus name right here, and that's Trevor Lawrence. Do you feel like anybody else belongs in tier 4 along with the 4 wide receivers and the number 1 pick in the NFL draft?
Yeah, I think that since this is a one quarterback league we're doing, that I'm fine grouping those top 3 quarterbacks together. I think you can make a case for any of them in this particular format. In Superflex, you want the safer asset in Lawrence, I think. But if you're playing in a one quarterback league, and you think you'd rather take a shot at the upside of what Lance or Fields can do on the ground, then I don't really see a strong argument against that. So that's why I put them here, and also because I think this is those 2 quarterbacks are probably the last 2 that I don't have a ton of question marks. I think this tier in general everybody has a little bit of question marks, except I guess Lawrence. But after that, then we get into like the serious question marks. So that's why I felt comfortable putting them in the same tier as Lawrence.
Okay. I also had Trey Lance along in tier 4, along with Trevor Lawrence. And I've been on record saying I think there's a pretty good chance, at least, that Lance is the better fantasy option for us as dynasty managers. So I don't have a problem with him being in the tier. Ryan, you drew a line between Lawrence and then Lance and Fields. Can you make a compelling case that they should be bumped down?
No, I mean, not necessarily. Just other than the fact we're talking about a one quarterback format. So in general, I think we're pushing quarterbacks down just due to the depth of the position in general. I don't have a strong argument against Lance here. I mean, I do still clearly see Lawrence as the better option in fantasy.
All right, so Lance ends up getting bumped up because both me and Matt have him in tier 4. There is a line, though. Matt, you said you wouldn't mind having Justin Fields in the same tier as well. Now, me and Ryan, we both have him just a tier below, and that pushes him to the top of tier 5. So there's going to be a difference there. Beyond Fields at the top of tier 5, who do you think fits in the next group of players?
Yeah, the next group is where you're not sure what you're going to get, maybe even in year 1, with the exception of one player, I guess. But that's Trey Sermon starting out here. How does he fit in with that backfield from the get-go? Does it take a while for him to get going? Carter, he might Carter. I mean, I could even make an argument for him being in the tier above, I guess, based on potential opportunity. But, 4th round running back for a team that we have historically not really wanted fantasy options from, right? So a little bit hard to get over that mental barrier. And then you get into De'Ami Brown. You think he's going to be pretty good with Washington, but I think there's enough there to have him a little bit more question marks than the receivers in the tier above him. Kadarius Toney is someone I've not been a fan of, but I'm trying to come around on a little bit. Paul Perticchese over Saturday to Sunday, he makes a lot of good points about how a lot of those issues with the depth chart right now could be gone next season. Jason Garrett could be gone next season. We have a new front office, a new head coach, all that kind of stuff. And then we have a scheme where it's Galladay and Toney as the top 2 receivers, right? Maybe even Evan Ingram's gone. So I'm trying to come around a little bit to that line of thinking to go along with the draft capital. He's not a player that I'm super into, but trying to respect that a little bit. And then St. Brown, who's all about opportunity there in Detroit. You have the 2 outside receivers with Perriman and Williams if they can stay healthy, and St. Brown just fits perfectly there in the slot. He'll have to share with Hawkinson in that range, obviously, but enough opportunity there to consider him in this range.
Ryan, you, after bumping Trey Lance up to tier 4 and Fields falling in tier 5, you pretty much fell in line with what Matt said, with the exception of a couple players. So why did you draw the line after Lance, then Fields, then Tony, Sermon, and Carter? You weren't willing to put Dyami Brown or a couple of the other names into tier 5.
Yeah, this in some ways, this feels like the most clear-cut tier for me, that you've got these players either with the first-round draft capital that we like to see, obviously talking about Kadarius Toney there, the two running backs who got a boost due to their landing spot with Trey Sermon and Michael Carter. I think they're pretty clearly the RBs 4 and 5 in this group. I don't think anybody else is necessarily close behind them, and they're certainly not close to Javonte Williams or any of the others. And then beyond, I know Matt talked about Brown and St. Brown, and I like those guys as late second or third round options, but they just seem like far from a sure thing to contribute or really to ever do anything potentially in the NFL. And I think even if it's a short-term situation, Carter, Sermon, Kadarius Toney, they're going to give us something as fantasy assets.
Yeah, and I fell in line with you on that. I toyed, I guess, with putting Amari Rodgers into this tier, and I think maybe it's probably the question mark surrounding the quarterback position in Green Bay that I finally decided he maybe belonged closer to tier 6, along with Dyami Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and a couple of other names. So I guess, Matt, you're going to be forced to wait on Amari Rodgers and St. Brown and Dyami. You won a bigger battle earlier in the episode, so I suppose you'll take that win over this one. We end up with just 4 names in tier 5. That's Justin Fields, Trey Sermon, Kadarius Toney, and Michael Carter. So we're getting close to the second round, or the end of the second round, guys. Ryan, you mentioned that this feels like a clear-cut tier to you, that maybe this is where there would be a line drawn in pen maybe for you when you get to drafts. Let's talk a little bit about value of trading up and down. We've hit a couple of these tiers where we felt like there was a strong line that we're not willing to go below unless we absolutely have to. When we're starting to talk about the mid to end part of round 2, how aggressively are you moving into these tiers to try to get one, maybe even 2 of these players?
Well, I think if you really believe in your tiers, whether these are rankings that you've created yourself, or if you are relying on DLF rankings, on ADP, on your favorite analyst rankings, whatever it might be, I think you should always be aggressive in trying to move up and snag that last player of a tier as they start to get picked off. But the good thing is, the later you're getting in a draft, those tiers are getting larger and larger. So, Dan, you and I had this happen in a league that we run with a team that we run together, that we were trying to move up and get that player. Our tier was drying up, and there were players chosen ahead of us that we weren't even considering. And that becomes the deeper in a draft you go, that becomes a pretty common thing that happens. So, yes, definitely be aggressive, be active, have those conversations, but sometimes you'll find that the player you're hoping for lands in your lap as well.
Yeah, and what's nice about it is, because it's so late in the draft or later in the draft, the cost to move up isn't always that great. It's usually relatively cheap to move up a few picks, unless a manager is really dead set on a player. And again, like you said, sometimes they're dead set on a player that you don't even want. Matt, what about you? Because I've heard you say multiple times that things dry up awfully quick when you get towards the end of the second round. So how aggressive are you this draft season when it comes to trying to move into the second round or into these tiers that land in the second round, and not necessarily looking at grabbing players in the third round?
I would say not the late second round, and I'm the only really aggressive moves I would say I've made is to move into those. Well, according to what we're doing today, the top 2 tiers, so one of those top 4 picks in a 1 quarterback draft. And if I can't land a pick or 2 in that range, then I want to have multiple shots, maybe 2 or 3, maybe even 4 if I can, from our tier 4 and tier 5 area. Because after that, for me, it gets to the point where I'm ready to just trade out of this class if I can, or maybe move it for a depth piece on a contending team, something like that. I'm just not super interested in being aggressive in that range. So I guess you could say the early second, if you want to consider that in the shotgun approach range, that's the area. But otherwise, I'm okay completely getting out at this point.
So we've gotten all the way through tier 5 so far. Let's quickly recap before we move on to tier 6. In tier 1, we had Kyle Pitts and Jamar Chase, just 2 players in tier 2 as well. The 2 big running back names, that's Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. In tier 3, we added 3 players. That's Javonte Williams, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Smith. Tier 4 was a little bigger, fellas. That went Rashad Bateman, Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, Terrace Marshall, Trevor Lawrence, and Trey Lance. Then in tier 5, we had 4 players in there: Justin Fields, Trey Sermon, Kadarius Toney, and Michael Carter. So we need to move into the latter part of round 2, and then a few names in round 3 we'll sprinkle in as well. In tier 6, guys, we have 4 names that definitely have to be in here. It's Dyami Brown, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, Amari Rodgers, and Pat Freiermuth. These are still players with some draft capital, some landing spots that we kind of like, Ryan. If we get beyond those 4 names, are there other names that should be thrown in?
Yeah, I had a couple other guys in this tier. Josh Palmer would be there for me. He got the draft capital. I like the landing spot with the Chargers. And as we've talked about and others have talked about, I think this is probably going to be Mike Williams' final season with the Chargers. Really everything else with that team is going to be a benefit to Josh Palmer as far as the quarterback in place and hopefully an offense that's going to cater to that passing game. So when you factor in Palmer's ADP, like in that late second, early third round range, he becomes a pretty easy player to click the button on for me. So I would have him in this range with Rodgers, Brown, St. Brown.
I don't hate that, Matt. I noticed you had Palmer in this tier as well. Is there anybody else on top of Palmer that you'd add to the names Brown, St. Brown, Rodgers, and Freiermuth?
Yeah, I think you can throw Nico Collins in here. I think it's going to be gross. So, he could be one of those candidates that just don't really have any value going into year 2, and you can pick them up cheap then. Not that this is expensive by any means, but Dwayne Eskridge, just mainly because of the second round draft capital. But was that just to stick it to the Rams to try to get up ahead of them? Like, it feels like a very weird pick. We've talked about a little bit redundant with Tyler Lockett. I guess he could play the slot if there's going to be enough volume to go around there. And then Ramondre Stevenson, I've been moving up a little bit. He's interesting. I think I read something or heard some rumor that, who knows, this time of year, right? But that Sony Michel might actually be a cut candidate later in camp. If that happens and Harris is terrible again, maybe you see Stevenson at least get some kind of short yardage or goal line role, and he can catch the ball as well. Not that he's going to be used over James White, but he has that ability, I would say, to be a 3 down back if they really wanted him to be in like the most extreme of situation, right? So that's the point where I'm willing to take him. And then the rest of these guys, the rest of the receivers and running backs are all guys that we're going to talk about, are just guys that I like. If I have a pick in that range and I can't get out of it, I'm happy to take my favorite one of them. But I'm not going to be too stressed if I missed out on anybody else.
Yeah, it feels like after round 2 for you, Matt, not to speak for you or anything like that, you're putting one big tier together, right?
Yeah,
they're all about worth the same to you.
Pretty much.
So we're gonna try to force our way through a few more names here. I also had Nico Collins in the same tier along with Josh Palmer. So that tier 6 really ends up being Dyami Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Amari Rodgers, Pat Freiermuth, Josh Palmer, and Nico Collins. Beyond that, Ryan, you mentioned Zach Wilson. You have a few other names that need to certainly be mentioned right around here as far as values, guys that could turn up, make rosters, make dynasty rosters, and make an impact for us, maybe down the line, right?
Yeah, I think this is where I would consider both of the other 2 first-round quarterbacks, both Wilson and Mac Jones. And then some of the players that maybe dynasty managers liked a little more than the NFL, that some of these guys fell further than we would have expected. Tylan Wallace, Kenneth Gainwell, Chuba Hubbard, all in that group as well. And then Matt already talked about Dwayne Eskridge. I have him in this range also. So that would be my tier 7.
Yeah, it really feels like that's really a consensus. The only name that you probably didn't mention there that maybe should be talked about is Ramondre Stevenson, because Matt mentioned him as a potential tier 6 guy. I'm with you. I had him a little bit lower. I even skipped him in tier 7 like you did and went down to tier 8 for him. Talk to me about Stevenson and what's holding you back from moving him up in your rankings.
Mostly the depth of that position for the Patriots. I don't think certainly don't think he's a better pass catcher than James White. I don't think he's a better ball carrier than Damian Harris, and maybe not even Sony Michel. So I just see a tough path for him gaining any real playing time in that on that roster. And I mean, we know how Bill Belichick likes to move those running backs in and out. Maybe you view that as a good thing for Stevenson, that he'll get a chance eventually, but mostly I view it as a negative for him and really everybody on that running back depth chart.
Yeah, Stevenson, I continue to try to get on board because you hear especially a lot of people that are in the redraft community talking highly of him and his upside, maybe even immediately in his career. And I just can't turn the page on it. Can't really get him up in these tiers. So I have him pushed down a little bit lower as well. We end up in tier 7 here as we're talking in the middle of the 3rd round, early to mid 3rd round. It goes Zach Wilson, who I'm starting to agree with you. He kind of sticks out as a sore thumb here, Ryan. Maybe he did belong in tier 6, one spot ahead, but we end up with Zach Wilson, Tylan Wallace, Dwayne Eskridge, Chuba Hubbard, and Kenneth Gainwell. The only other name that I had mentioned right here was Tutu Atwell. And the only reason I have him in here, fellas, is because of the draft capital. Another 2nd round receiver landing in an offense with a good quarterback, great play caller, a guy that if he finds the right role and enough of a role that he could make an impact for dynasty managers. Maybe I'm looking at it with rose-colored glasses or maybe a little bit too glass half full when it comes to Tutu Atwell. But is there something that could be said about Tutu that would make you consider him at this point in the draft rather than a tier below, Matt?
I would have to go back and look in the notes, but I think he's one of the rookie dominator breakout age guys. So I guess you could hang your hat on that, but just his size and his role in that offense, I just don't see it. They took a 2nd round receiver last year with a very different skill set, obviously, but to play, in the same kind of area in the field, if it breaks out like the way their depth chart is aligned, right? And then of course, Deshaun Jackson there is probably still a better version of what Atwell is going to be. So it's just an odd fit. So I could see taking a shot on him as just like a random dart throw, but it's not someone I'm going to pursue.
Ryan, anything to add on Tutu Atwell?
Yeah, it just seems like, Dan, you just said it. I've said it myself. Not necessarily on podcasts, but just in conversations about rookie drafts. I've heard so many people say you have to take him because of the 2nd round draft capital, or that's the only reason I would consider him. And if that really is the case, which I think it is for me, if he was a 5th or a 6th rounder, he wouldn't even be this high. That's probably not a good reason if that's the only reason to take him, even though we're talking about tier 7 or 8.
I think maybe for me, it might be giving that coaching staff and Sean McVay too much credit and really falling in line with the man. He's a weapon. He was sold as a weapon for so long. And this guy that could be used creatively when he's matched with a head coach that calls his own plays and has been known as a creative play caller, that feels like there's potential there. And when you're talking about a mid 3rd, it seems like that could be a nice investment, and there could be places where you could profit off a Tutu Atwell. Maybe that's only in those best ball leagues. Maybe that format might add to his value. Perhaps I'm looking at through that lens as well. But Atwell seems like he fits in right around here. I don't mind him being a tier below, though.
Yeah, someone forgive me, I cannot remember who this was, but someone posted the Rams wide receiver draft picks over the past think it was 10 years maybe. Cooper Kupp was a hit, but that was it.
That was it.
They were all not only not hits, they were all really bad. So,
really bad busts, right?
And that goes back further than this current coaching staff. But I think I think we need to be careful with saying this team did well, this coaching staff did well with Cooper Kupp, or they turned Robert Woods' career around. You got to be careful not to give them too much credit.
Yeah, that's a good point. So tier 7 ends with Wilson, Wallace, Eskridge, Hubbard, Gainwell. We're that far, Matt. You're on the clock. You can't trade the pick. Who's the guy you're picking if you're on the clock at, I suppose we're in the middle of the third round?
I'd probably look at 2 running backs that have, maybe a path to touches. Javian Hawkins at UDFA for the Falcons, just Mike Davis really there to get excited about. Khalil Herbert, I liked a lot pre-draft. He kind of has that lead back profile. He's got the size. He can catch the ball pretty well. And he's kind of a hedge against Montgomery being not the same Montgomery that we saw over the second half of the season, or, an injury hedge, of course, and then Tariq Cohen coming back as well. So I think he can be the pass catching back if Cohen isn't the guy, and he can be the lead back if for some reason Montgomery isn't effective or isn't in the picture. So those 2 would be my dart throws in the third round.
Ryan, you got any? It seems like we're going to stretch these tiers really, really wide once we get this deep. Are there other names that need to be mentioned for sure? Somebody that's it, when you're on the clock in the third round, you're especially excited about.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go that far with especially excited, but I think we've talked Javian Hawkins, we've talked Tutu Atwell. We better talk about the third kid from Louisville, Des Fitzpatrick. He got both surprising draft capital and the nice landing spot with the Titans, potential at least to be the wide receiver 2 there. Not necessarily sold on him or on him just easily bypassing a guy like Josh Reynolds, but certainly the opportunities there. And again, we're talking about a mid-third round pick.
So let's quickly recap these tiers. Tier 1 goes Kyle Pitts and Jamar Chase. Then in tier 2, it's just Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. We widened things out in tier 3 and went 3 deep with Javonte Williams, Jalen Waddle, and Devonta Smith. Again, I should say these aren't in any necessary order. They're just in a tier together, these players. Tier 4 went Rashad Bateman, Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, Terrace Marshall, Trevor Lawrence, and Trey Lance. Then in tier 5, we added Justin Fields, Trey Sermon, Kadarius Toney, and Michael Carter to give you an example of or an idea of where we are in a draft. That's 17 players through tier 5. In tier 6, we had 6 players: Diami Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Amari Rogers, Pat Freiermuth, Josh Palmer, and Nico Collins. Then in tier 7, to get through 28 players, so into the third round, Zach Wilson, Tylan Wallace, Dwayne Eskridge, Chuba Hubbard, and Kenneth Gainwell. We should mention Atwell and Jones, Ramondre Stevenson. Those were really the next guys that we were talking about. They'd be in tier 8 along with some other names. Fellas, we have a few minutes. So let's talk about the trade market right now when it comes to these rookies. We all use the trade finder. We use the trade analyzer over there at DLF. Those are great tools that can help you become a better dynasty manager. But Matt, you've been looking at a bunch of these trades, watching these relatively closely, trying to get a gauge on where the value is with these players. And Javonte Williams is one of those players that in the first round, you can see him moving around. Or there's some trades that you're seeing out there that maybe caught your eye so we can get a good gauge on where his value is, because we were talking about him as a potential player that could be all by himself in tier 3, the 5th overall player in single quarterback leagues. If that's happening and there's a clear line on both sides of him, what's the trade market looking like for him?
Yeah, the most recent trade is pretty interesting. I think I'm heavily on the opposite side, but if you need a running back, then you might want the Javonte Williams and Savon Ahmed side. It's probably Myles Gaskin there, but Ahmed was productive on the other side of the trade. So Javonte Williams and Savon Ahmed for Cooper Kupp, the 110, and the 112. So then this is a one quarterback league. So you get Cooper Kupp, probably two shots at those receivers, and I think our tier 5, the tier with Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore, Terrace Marshall. So you might get 2 shots there. So I think in that case, unless I'm really starving at running back, I'm easily taking the 3 wide receivers on that side.
I kind of like that side of the trade on the right roster, where you're looking at throwing the dart at one of the best of those wide receivers or your favorite wide receiver. And if you're not in love with going with a second one, maybe that's the place where you go to Trevor Lawrence and try to get that franchise quarterback at the end of the first round with Javonte. Any others, Matt?
Yeah, I have one more, and this was let's see, Javonte Williams, a 201 and a 2022 third. This is in a super flex league, so the picks are a little more valuable for Jamar Chase and the 510. And this is a Devy best ball league, it looks like. So probably goes a little bit deeper. I don't know where the Devy actually starts there, but in that case, I just want the best player, right? I think I just want to take Chase, no matter really what's on the other side.
Yeah, it really feels that way. Looking at it in a vacuum, we're not exactly sure what those details of the league are exactly, but it feels that way. Ryan, how about you? Kyle Pitts is a guy that is almost untradeable, and you can't really acquire him. Unacquirable, I guess it would be the word. At least on Twitter, from everything that I see, we talk to a lot of guys who have showed some screenshots of some really crazy trade offers that got denied on MFL. So tell me what kind of trades are going through when it comes to Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, they're equally expensive here, and you do have to be a little careful with the trade finder, because we don't always know the context of the league. Sometimes they're Devy. We may or may not know that depending on the title of the league. And we do know, though, Superflex or not. We typically know tight end premium or not. But yeah, some of these trades are hard to believe. This is a Superflex league, which comes into play when we're looking at the draft pick. Kyle Pitts on one side, and he was traded for the 1.04 rookie pick. So we're assuming that's maybe that's Justin Fields or Jamar Chase, someone like that in a super flex league, along with Jerry Jeudy. So Pitts for Jeudy and the 1.04, pretty expensive. It's, I don't know. It just becomes a conversation of, is it too early to cash out on this guy? I mean, if you take him at 101 or 102, is it crazy to consider flipping him? I mean, before training camp, way before training camp even gets started. When I'm looking at some of these trades, I don't think it's that crazy.
And what's really insane to me about it is you're choosing a player at 104 in that specific trade that was widely considered the 102 in Superflex leagues just a couple of months ago. We were all thinking that Fields or really whoever falls to that spot at 104. Now to get Jeudy on top of that seems like a massive haul, but I've heard of even bigger hauls happening when it comes to Pitts on the trade market, Matt.
Yeah, I've seen some crazy rejections, and honestly, I can't fault the team that is keeping Chase. There's a couple of trades that Bosch has shown, our buddy John Bosch has showed us, where it's been rejected straight up for Christian McCaffrey. I think it was straight up. There might have been some from other pieces on there. So like if we're talking that, like that's the 101 in most one quarterback dynasty leagues, right? So, but if you're a rebuilding team, and you just drafted Kyle Pitts very high because you have a bad team, like, why am I going to move him for an asset? Like, if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt again, like, there's no question almost that Pitts is probably more valuable than McCaffrey next season, right? So I just think he's kind of untouchable at this point. One other crazy trade that got rejected, at least in my opinion, in a Superflex league, Patrick Mahomes for Trey Lance, Kyle Pitts, and then some 4th round picks. So basically Mahomes for Lance and Pitts. And like, that seems like a difficult decision too. Like, obviously I want Mahomes, but if I'm a bad team, why don't I take 2 shots at potentially elite players? So I just think he's pretty untouchable right now. And if you really do want to move him, you should aim super high.
Yeah. I checked this out because he ended up, our May DLF ADP just got posted late last week, and he ended up with an ADP late in the third round, I believe. And I went back the 9 or 10 years that we've been collecting ADP data every single month. Only 9 tight ends have ever been drafted higher than Kyle Pitts is here. Essentially his first month in the league. The first month we have a team designation beside his name. Only 9 other tight ends ever. Now, we did see years ago, we saw Rob Gronkowski. We even saw Jimmy Graham end up as first-round Dynasty startup picks, even in the non-tight end premium leagues. What do you guys think are the percentages that Kyle Pitts is a first-rounder this time next year in startup drafts?
Like, I don't like give you an exact number, but like, I think it's pretty high. I think he's the tight end 1 in Dynasty almost no matter what, unless he just gets hurt or completely falls flat on his face. Like if he has a back end tight end 1 season in his rookie season, he's going to be the tight end 1 overall. So that just where are you going to put that? And then, and then you could compare it to Travis Kelce. If Travis Kelce was 20 in his early 20s right now, we know already knew the kind of advantage he's going to give us. Would he be a first round pick? I think so. So I think it's, I don't think it's out of the question at all. I'd put it better than 50% that he's a back end, first round pick at the, maybe not at the highest. He could be mid first round pick, but I think there's a good chance that he's right in that range of a fringe first round pick.
I think it's a little below 50% in my opinion. If you said top 16 or top 15, something like that, I could probably get on board. I just, you think about that rookie class that we're just coming out of, that those guys that are going into their sophomore year and what we have, the expectations we have for those guys. A lot of those guys are going to gain value. It feels like to me throughout the season, but you're right. All it's going to take is Kyle Pitts making one of those one-handed grabs in the end zone with 3 guys draped on him, and that's just going to add fuel to the fire, and he could spike all the way into the first round. So it doesn't feel like it's over 50% to me. I'd put it closer at 40 or maybe 35 even, that he gets into the top 12. But if you said top 16 or top 18, that feels like it's a 75, a 90%. Maybe even if you went as far as 18.
Yeah, just a couple other Kyle Pitts trades to throw out. Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney for CD Lamb. Kyle Pitts, this is another super flex league. Kyle Pitts for Myles Gaskin and the 1.05. So similar to what we were talking about earlier as far as that 5th pick in a super flex league. And then, Dan, this one's for you. Kyle Pitts, even up for Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, my goodness. Holy cow. That's giving up a top 5 startup pick.
Wow.
Top 3, top 1 startup pick for Kyle Pitts. Give me JT. That one is pretty.
I think that's the only one I've seen so far that's pretty clear on the non-Pitts side. But I just like the fear of missing out on Pitts is just so strong right now in the community, and I can't say that I don't have the same fear of missing out there too. So.
Yeah, it feels as close as we've had in a while as a guy that can't bust or something along those lines. We all feel pretty confident that not only he's going to be a really, really good player, but there's the chance that he could be a real difference maker in Dynasty, in fantasy, that can win you weeks and win you championships from a position that we're looking for more guys to be able to do that, or at least take over for Kelce as the guy that can carry you through seasons and into championships.
I got a question for you guys. If you are a strong contender and you have Kelce on your team, you're probably still trading him for Pitts, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, even if I'm like a top 3 team in the league and I have Kelce and he's going to be a part of the run, I'm probably still moving him directly for Pitts.
It feels like most Dynasty managers would.
Whoever, any of them, any other tight end.
And it's really a shame because Kelce's been so consistent and so great. And if you're in the position to win that back-to-back title fund or whatever, that progressive pot, maybe that talks you into keeping Kelce for the year. But it's really an interesting situation. Ryan, you have any Najee Harris trades? Throw a couple at us before we get out of here.
Yeah, I've got a couple with Najee Harris as well. He's another player that I think is pretty interesting when it comes to his value, because many have him as the 101 in Dynasty rookie drafts, and some like me, and I think Matt is on board with this, don't necessarily even have him as the RB1 among the rookie class. So not quite all over the board with his value, but certainly some difference of opinions. Najee Harris for Joe Mixon, even up in a trade there. I think that one's pretty fair. That's kind of where I would have him ranked, in that low end RB1 range. Let's see. There was, there was one more. Oh, here we go. Najee Harris this is a 24 team league. It's a 2 quarterback league, and everything else is flex. So I love this format. We don't know if it's multiple copy. I assume it probably is. But this trade is Najee Harris for Mecole Hardman and 3 first-round picks, the 110, the 118, and the 120. Normally, I would take the picks, but in this class, I mean, you're talking about, maybe that's Bateman and I don't know, De'Ami Brown and Pat Freiermuth or something like that, and it doesn't look quite as attractive when you put names with those picks.
Yeah, you'd wish that last pick, that 1.20 or whatever it was a future first or something like that, to give you a little bit more upside down the road, but because that doesn't feel good to me at all. Harris is an interesting one, Matt, because whether you're playing in Superflex or in a 1 quarterback league, he's highly regarded by most of the league. And I think we were all on Twitter and saw the pictures of him in the Steelers garb and at rookie minicamp and everything. Dude looks impressive and looks like a guy that could dominate the Pittsburgh backfields for years to come. So another guy that I saw those pictures and I thought to myself, oh, I hope I'm not wrong about having him as my RB2 in the class.
Yeah, he does look impressive. That offense, I mean, the weak point is going to be, it has the potential to be a fantastic offense, right? If the offensive line can actually come together despite the lack of experience there, and Ben can hold it together for another season. They've got 3 wideouts. They've got their current tight end. They've got their future tight end if he's ready to go too. So that offense looks very impressive if the line and Ben can keep it together.
What do you guys think, now that we're talking about rookie minicamp and stuff, what do you think of the whole ETN playing wide receiver all minicamp? Well, how's that look for your Dynasty shares?
I think he could play a slot. He could be the slot receiver, sure. But why?
Why? Exactly why?
Well, I think
Visca needs to be in there, right, Matt?
Yeah, come on.
I think
maybe Visca's going to be the running back.
I think that the news, and I don't even know if we should call it news, but this Travis Etienne news mixed with the Tim Tebow signing. I mean, before training camp even starts, I think there's a lot of doubters of Urban Meyer out there. Yeah, lots of just like wondering what this guy is doing already.
Yeah, and it's really a shame because the idea of all the things that he did throughout his college career and now mixed with these weapons that are in place in Jacksonville, it's enough to get a dynasty manager excited about the potential there in Jacksonville. But now these question marks, these head-scratching comments and moves that you're seeing, hopefully things even out sooner rather than later with Jacksonville, with all those players we're so excited about. So guys, it was a lot of fun doing the consensus rookie tiers. I'm glad we got to talk about those rookie trades as well, because that's on the minds of a lot of dynasty managers. We're going to keep it with the rookie talk next week. Again, we're going to do that rookie cash, stash, and trash. We're going to try to get through as many of these guys and project them out years into the future. See how we feel about these guys that we're investing so heavily in. So for Ryan and Matt, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening to this episode of the DLF Dynasty Podcast. We'll catch you again next week.